Welcome, everyone. My name is Amber Samdahl, and I'm the Director of Design and Innovation at PBS Wisconsin. I also co-lead Public Media Innovators alongside my colleague, Chad Davis. And for those of you not familiar with Public Media Innovators, we are a national peer learning community for public media professionals. We're facilitated through NETA, so big thanks to NETA for all their support. And today's webinar is a collaboration between Public Media Innovators and Current. And I'm excited to be co-hosting today with my colleague, Mike Jansen from Current. And just to briefly set the stage, I'm going to open up a poll for you all to fill out as we kind of go through our introduction here. So let me get that launched. All right, so hopefully that is up for everybody. Short little poll for you all to kind of take a look at. So it gives us a sense of who our audience is as we're diving in today. So, as you know, we're here today to talk about newsletters. And at a time when social platforms keep changing the rules on us, newsletters are one of those few places where you can really better own our relationship directly with our audience. So today we have several experts joining us from different stations across public media who are each doing really unique and interesting, creative things with newsletters in a lot of different ways. So I'm looking forward to diving in, learning from all of them, what they've built, the lessons they've learned along the way, and really appreciative of all of our guests today. And finally, one last quick housekeeping note before we start. Please do drop your questions in the chat as we go. We'll have time for Q&A at the end, and we want to make sure we get to as many questions as we can with the time. So feel free as the webinar goes along to drop those questions in the chat. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike.
All right, thank you. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, and thank you for joining us. I'm Mike Jansen. I'm digital editor for Current. And to build on what Amber was saying, new platforms and tools are always popping up, but the humble newsletter is a constant, and it's still a great way to connect directly with audiences. You're in their inbox, it's personal, it's reliable, and it's a one-on-one relationship. Our panelists today have focused on making the most of that connection, and I'm really looking forward to hearing their insights and sharing them with you. Today, we'll be talking with Madeline King. She's newsletter product manager at Iowa Public Radio. Chanel Berlin Johnson, director of audience engagement for LAist, and Brianna Lee, senior producer for community engagement at LAist. Jenny Peak, newsletter editor at Wisconsin Public Radio, and Autumn Widows, marketing manager for Vegas PBS. So let's just take a look at the results of the poll before I get started here. Looks like we have a good number of you who already have multiple newsletters, a very small number who don't have a newsletter at all. And it looks like nearly a third of you are rethinking or rebuilding your newsletter strategy. So especially for those of you in that category, I think today will be very helpful, but I think everybody can find something to take away from it. So let's get started with Madeline. She is the newsletter product manager at Iowa Public Radio. In 2023, her team at Iowa Public Radio won an Online News Association Award for Excellence in Newsletters. They have 5 newsletters, each with a different focus. And Madeline, you want to share one of those with us as we get started here on your screen?
Yeah, I'll show you guys our flagship newsletter, which is our daily newsletter that started initially along with my job. During the pandemic, we just wanted a way to, can you see that? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Wanted a way to be able to obviously share important COVID-19 updates and daily numbers from the state of Iowa with folks. And that quickly evolved into, including other information from our reporters. And then we leveraged this beginning newsletter into the 5 that we have now. So this is kind of just our daily basic news breakdown from our reporters. So all of this is just daily spots that we then post on a live blog on our website and then shorten down even more for our newsletter. We include weather because people want statewide weather. And then we do share from the NPR network as well. This is often just reporting from NPR, but if I see articles that I like or think would be interesting to our audience that are from other member stations as well, we'll link out there. But that's usually just if I find it. And then we have a couple reporting partners that we work with, including the Midwest Newsroom and Harvest Public Media. So we include their work as well. since a lot of times it's either written by one of our reporters or have it has an impact on our audience, many farmers in Iowa. So, and then one of our favorite things about this newsletter is the sunny side. We always have a bit of good news at the end of the day. And that can be something that we report on or from a different outlet, but we started that with the very first newsletter, and have been doing it ever since. So we're very proud of that. End the day with a bit of good. And then we do have, oh goodness, several more. We've got an arts newsletter, we've got politics, we've got our weekly arts and culture. We run the full gambit.
Yeah. Yeah, those are really great looking newsletters. So you do have five newsletters, as you mentioned, each with a different focus. And how have you decided over time which topics to focus on beyond just your daily flagship?
Yeah, I mean, we're a small shop like many and can't really do everything we want to. So the biggest thing is just making sure that we have a consistent it's a beat that we own and we have consistent content coming from it. So some of them are, we have one bike weekly, most of them are weekly. And that's just kind of based off of what we know we'll be able to provide in that amount of time. My rule of thumb is never base it off of one person's job. So although we do have an arts and culture newsletter and an arts and culture reporter, that newsletter isn't fully sustained by her wonderful reporting. We also pull in content from our talk shows and from a film contributor that we have. So it's a good mix. And that way, if somebody's out or plans change or anything like that, we're always secured in terms of coverage.
Yeah, definitely. Um, and you have a newsletter about music, as you showed us. You also have a newsletter about gardening. And you mentioned to me that those have a regional appeal that goes just beyond Iowa, even. How do you find and connect with an audience when you're considering it's an audience outside of your state?
Yeah, both of those, especially when we launched them, we put a lot of concerted effort into trying to make sure that we were reaching audiences elsewhere. For the gardening one, it's tied to a legacy gardening show that we have on air and have had for about 40 years. So and a podcast of the same name. So we definitely promote it on air, but we've also done some like organic reaching out to Facebook gardening groups and other kind of community organizers that we know might be interested. And we do, that one's tied with our a university as well, specialists there. So they do some good communication on our behalf. The music newsletter, we have a pretty impressive music scene here in Iowa, where we get a lot of national acts, and that means we get a lot of interviews with national acts. So we've been really fortunate to find a lot of organic growth in our reporting and we have put some paid money behind marketing for it, but not, a terrible amount. I think it's really a testament to the interviews that our team is getting. Um, Obviously, we have like robust signups and we do on our website and we also do pop-up campaigns as well. So I think all of that is tied into the growth we've seen there.
I saw a question pop up here in the chat or a request to mention the title and department of each guest, and I will recap that as we move on to each of you. But just to recap with Madeline, for anyone who missed it, she's the newsletter product manager at Iowa Public Radio. Could you show again that feedback request at the bottom of one of the newsletters that we were looking at? I wanted to ask you
Yes.
about that.
Yes, so we had chatted about so for our daily newsletter, we actually just retooled a little bit. Sorry, I'm trying to speak and look for the button at the same time. We just retooled kind of how we, um, just its looks, just a few aesthetic things. We didn't really change anything about the content that's in it. But whenever we do that, I want to get some feedback on whether or not I'm going the right direction. So at the end of our newsletter, we have just at the very end, we have an ability to share your feedback. I like it, I don't like it, I'm unsure. And these are all tied to pre-filled Google Forms. So it's already filled out when you get there. So just by clicking that button, we do get an automatic response, which is great. If they go on to fill out the rest of it, that's great for me. Adds additional feedback, but A lot of what I'm doing in the newsletter space is self-taught and kind of going with my gut. So it's nice to get a vibe check in the form of these surveys. And we have done this for a while. We used to do a face file version, which essentially was having like a smiley face or a frowny face and letting people decide that. So this is our old layout, but we just have these versions. So if you don't like it, it'll let you know quickly.
Right. And have you found ways to, respond to that feedback, to build on it? Have you made changes based on what people have told you?
Yeah, I mean, again, a lot of it is kind of just making sure that we're on the right track, but we are able to quickly look at how people are feeling, love that they like it. This is the results from the latest one. So we just launched this new template about 3 months ago, I want to say. So we're getting a decent amount of responses. I mean, this is showing that people are scrolling to the end of the email, which is nice. But mainly, I just like to make sure that people are able to read it. Generally, like the layout. Obviously, there are going to be naysayers for every product that you put out, but I just like to make sure that I'm not overwhelmingly making a wrong choice or going in a wrong direction because those are honestly really easy to change, especially if you're seeing a pattern. So um, I have not dove into this too much yet. I am planning to. It's on my list for this next month, but obviously we'll make changes as we need to.
Yeah, yeah. What advice would you offer someone in a station who's trying to refine or develop a newsletter strategy based on your experience?
Um, Start with what you have, right? Like don't try and reinvent the wheel. Um, Personally, I think caring about aesthetics and checking for aesthetic, like accessibility is really important. Just make sure it looks good, but then also make sure you can read it on dark mode and that it's mobile friendly and all those kind of things. And it just test as much as possible. And I always get like a little test group at IPR if I'm doing something different. I'll make sure to send them different emails, ask them to check it on different devices, and just make sure that I'm, not missing anything. And send it to a variety of like age groups and because everyone has kind of their own readability and so I just like to test basically. The second thing I would say, add a voice. We call them top notes at the beginning of every newsletter. I think that's pretty standard, but just making your reporters or staff members be human is really good. It sets authority, but also just reminds them that we're just people. Um, and it usually starts the newsletter off on a really good tack, which is nice, unless there's a really bad news day, and then I get really serious. Um,
Yeah.
and then I always suggest breaking up the holy wall of text. Um, Everybody has so much coming to their inbox, try and make sure there are graphics, that it's laid out really clearly, use bullet points, use formatting, bold things. Just make sure it's because they can just go to your website too, but you're reaching them in their inbox. They've asked you to reach them there, and use the tools that you have at your disposal to make it stand out in a different way.
All right. That's great advice. Thank you so much. Next, we're going to talk with our guest from LAist. Brianna Lee is LAist Senior Producer for Community Engagement, and Chanel Berlin Johnson is their Director of Audience Engagement. LAist offers a number of newsletters, and some of them experiment with different formats in really interesting ways that we're going to get into. First, I want to ask something actually both to the LAist panelists and to Madeline, because they share something in common, which is that they have newsletters focused on politics that don't continuously run. They take breaks, which I thought was interesting. LAist has one called Make It Make Sense. And actually, if you guys are able to throw that one up on the screen, you can go ahead and share that now. It's a limited run newsletter that pops up after local elections to explain the results. And then it goes away for a while and comes back after the next election. And Iowa Public Radio has Political Sense, which runs when the state legislature is in session, but has off time as well. So I'd like to ask you both, starting with LAist, how do you handle that downtime, and what have you learned about retaining audience during those periods?
Sure. So I just started sharing a little bit of Make It Make Sense, which is our post-election newsletter. So just a little bit of a recap. We decided to launch this newsletter because we noticed there were a couple of things that we were dealing with at LAS. One was that we were really good at helping people prepare for election season, but after ballots, after like election day was over, our audience would kind of fall off a cliff. And that didn't mean things were over. We still had like a really long ballot counting period. It lasted, 2, 3, even 4 weeks. And so there was a lot of confusion during that time. So we thought a newsletter would be a good way to kind of like unpack the ballot count. So this is a little bit of what it looks like. Just kind of going how many votes were counted, how many more are there to go, what results do we know, what do we not know yet? Um, and so for the question of like how we retain audiences, because this really is just a pop-up newsletter, it only shows up after the election. It goes for about 3 weeks tops, and then it goes away until the next election cycle. So we've done this for about 3 election cycles so far. We're heading into our fourth right now. I think one thing that we have learned is we don't have to worry too much about really about the audiences going away and not coming back because they have come back. So, for example, the first time we launched this in the primary season of 2024. And so, we promised we would come back for the general election, and then we came back and we have a sign up on our website as people are looking for election resources. So people do come back if they fall off, from one election to the next because they do want to come back, they do want to research the next election, and the sign up is right there for them again. So even as uh, signups or like subscriber numbers have kind of gone up and down in between cycles. On the whole, they have generally increased. One exception is that we had a big email list purge across the board last year, so our numbers were kind of cut down because of that. But I fully expect that they are going to bounce back in this election cycle. We have a sign up on our website right now as we are heading into election season, and so I hear we're getting, lots and lots of subscribers right now.
And I'll say
Madeline,
too,
what do you see with that?
yeah, I'll say too, just to add on,
Oh,
part of
sorry.
the
Go ahead.
reason we're not as worried about the drop off too is because this newsletter was really made for people who are highly engaged on this topic. So, and we fulfill our promise. We say up front, once there's no more news to report about this election cycle, we'll leave you alone. We do that. And so that's also over the last few cycles built up some trust as well. Where it's like, all right, you do exactly what you'll say. I get all the information that I want. You go away. And then when I'm curious about the next election cycle, here you are again. So I think both making that promise clear up top and then fulfilling it also really helps with not losing people in the middle because they're getting what they asked for. And we are staying true to what we told them we would do. And that is, and it's so that highly engaged audience doesn't have a reason to leave as well.
Madeline, what do you see?
I mean, honestly, I feel like I'm doing a disservice here because ours is also politics, which is just like a very avid base. They like people who are into politics want whatever they can get. So ours is about our legislative session. We only report during that time period, and then I will pop in every once in a while for election results or important election coverage. But really, we haven't seen a drop off. Our open rates are slightly lower, but our list has also grown significantly since it started. It's somewhere around like 45% every time, which is awesome. So yeah, they want the content. We are also really upfront that it'll end. We give them a little warning when it will, and we deliver on that.
And while I have you, I wanted to ask because I've seen this come up in the chat, excuse me, a couple of times. People want to know what platforms y'all are using. And Madeline, it looked like you're using MailChimp, right?
Correct.
And at LAS, what are you guys using?
We're using Salesforce Marketing Cloud.
Okay. And I'll make sure to ask that of the other folks we talked to as well. And maybe we can get into that a little more during the Q&A. So, Brianna, you told me that you're looking at you make it make sense as a testing ground for a bigger or more expansive election product. And can you just talk a little bit about what that might be or what that might look like?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, it's very active in the 3-ish weeks after election day, right? And so it's really about like what are the results, what are they going to be, and then what is this going to mean for your life? And then we kind of go away until the next election season. I think what is really needed, and I've noticed that we could add a lot of value in between elections, especially since often there's 2 years between is that people often forget, what they voted on, maybe even a few months after election day, because there's so many down ballot races that we cover as well. And so we're really trying to experiment with turning this into more of a full-fledged election product where we not just tell you what the results are, but we check in on the measures that were passed and the people that were elected to office regularly. So we are actually next week, we are going to be trying that out for the very first time. We're going to do a week-long series about some of the things that we voted on in 2024. Even though we're in the 2026 election cycle and everybody's talking about 2026, it's still worth it to kind of check in on like, hey, remember these things that we passed, not even 2 years ago? How are they doing? We sent out campaign surveys at the time where people gave us specific campaign goals or promises. How have they lived up to them so far? So we're just going to do that this time around. I think the idea would be that we could build this out if people respond well to it, then we can build it out so that it's not just like a ballot counting type of newsletter, but it's really one that is about everything that happens post elections. Like, what are the results? How did the results turn out? How can that prepare you for the next election going forward? So I think that'll help fill in some of the gaps that I think we've noticed over time.
All right. Well, I also wanted to ask you about building your block, which is an interesting newsletter you do. That's a course. So it's like a 7-issue email series about the issue of the housing crisis in LA. Can you show us that? Do you have that ready to share? Or if
Yeah,
not, it's
let me
not a big deal. Okay.
Yeah, let me throw that up here. Yeah, so this is a newsletter that was made as a 7-day newsletter course that somebody would sign up for, and then I'm just going to show you the first issue right here. So this is the first issue. It's about the way this came about is because we report on housing all the time. It is the biggest issue in Southern California. It is the biggest issue in California in general, just the housing crisis. And yet, like learning about it comprehensively is really difficult. It's really like learning about what's happening on a day-to-day basis. You can find lots and lots of resources on that, but every time, I mean, my experience has been that every time you learn about one aspect of the crisis, you realize that there's a whole other aspect that you do not know about and was not explained in that one article. And a lot of this cannot really be explained in any one kind of article or maybe not even like a whole series. And I can share the link to this full sign up if people are interested as well. And so the idea came about to do this as a newsletter course because then you could sign up and get this series like one chunk a day, and you could build on things that you learned previously. Whereas, like, if you just had a web series for this, like, you would try to, it would be easy to kind of like stop and then forget that it was there and then, drop off or not be able to absorb it at once. There's so many different aspects to the housing crisis. So we really built this around common questions that we heard from people about housing development, like from people in our audience, from community members in general. We started out with a survey saying, like, when it comes to housing development in Los Angeles, like, what are some of the big questions that you have? What do you wish you understood better? And then we built issues around those questions. And this is like an evergreen newsletter. We only had to produce it once, and it was very bird's eye view. It's very like, what are people actually arguing about when they're arguing about housing? Because when you get into the actual arguments that are happening on the ground, they get very in the weeds. They're about this like regulation and this code and like whatever. And it's like it's hard to really understand like what's the actual tension here. And so this really zooms out and is able to kind of talk about it from like from a faraway view about not only, how do you understand the points of tension in the housing debate, but where are the points in which you, as a community member, where can you actually take action? Where's your voice heard in this process, and what can you do to push for whatever housing future it is that you want?
All right. Yeah, that's a really interesting format, and I think some other stations do similar things. So I just wanted to highlight that. Thank you. Chanel, I wanted to ask you, when we spoke before, you highlighted the importance of having a clear voice in your newsletters. And can you tell me about how LAist's approach to that has evolved over time with your newsletter strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of the newsletters that are in our portfolio now kind of evolved because of specific needs, like in the case of Make It Make Sense, we're building your block, but some of them even just based on emergencies, right? So what is now, for example, our daily newsletter for the AM and PM, like those started out, one of them during COVID, just as like a, here's what we know today. And then we had to evolve it. What we saw is that like initially, because they kind of had similar voice, like here's a leadership person in the organization telling you what we know, then they pivoted to just contributors from our audience engagement team or reporters. And that's, we saw opens and CTR kind of plateau or start to slowly decline over time. And what we found, or what we started to see too, is that people just didn't have a personality to latch onto. I think with newsletters, one commonality with something like social is people are looking for not just the authority of a brand, but to really connect to a personality, have that human touch, and form a relationship with that person. So for our dailies, we pivoted back. We went, okay, we need to find the right voice to lead these. Make It Make Sense and Building Your Block are all the same voice, and they have been for the past few election cycles with Bree. Those are performing really strong with those highly engaged audiences. So we basically brought that approach back to our dailies too. And when we started it, which is still pretty recent, we brought in an associate newsletter editor around November. And when he started, we were at 2.5 or 6% CTR, and we've slowly seen the dailies go back up. They're now over 3%, both of them. 3.12% is for the last 30 days that I looked at. So we're seeing people come back, form that relationship with our daily newsletter writer, Anthony Schneck. And he has a voice that's really funny, really warm, brings you into the news. And that also helps for when we want to experiment with those. It allows him to just message that to people. Hey, we're trying this. What do you like about it? You can tell me. We can sort of have a conversation. And that builds a strong relationship, even with that daily audience that's getting all kinds of news depending on what's happening in our community.
All right. Well, thank you. Let's turn to Jenny Peak. Jenny is Wisconsin Public Radio's newsletter editor. And Jenny, your station recently revamped its daily newsletter, which was formerly hands-off, powered by an RSS feed, no human intervention. And now you're curating the newsletter's content, and you write a personal note for each one, like what we've seen so far with our other examples. Why did your station decide to make that shift?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's been mentioned here already, but newsletters are like an owned content stream. They're not privy to algorithms and whatnot that you're seeing increasingly across social media. And I think that we kind of realized we were a little bit late to the party. We have a statewide network with a ton of amazing content, but we really wanted to work on building relationships with our community members. We are a legacy institution. WPR has been around for 100 years, and we've got a ton of members. And so we thought that really connecting them to somebody who's creating content would be a good way to build that community. And also, we've been exploring just this growing distrust in media and how pivotal it can be to like introduce people to the people making the news. And so whether that's having our reporters on social more often or having like a behind the scenes aspect, and this newsletter, like it comes from Jenny Peak. So I'm showing up in our people's inboxes every morning. My intro oftentimes stays newsy, but sometimes it's like, we're going to the county fair this weekend with my toddlers. Like, what's your favorite county fair in Wisconsin? And people will email and say, like, this one's my favorite. I've been going to it for this long, or I show pigs at this one, also Midwestern Wisconsinite. And so it's been really fun to see how many people will actually send me emails, and I always respond. And it's this kind of great relationship that we're building and working to build. And just to kind of jump back, we launched in June. So we're coming up on a year from this new model.
And before I forget, since people wanted to know, what platform are you on?
We use MailChimp as well.
Okay. And you were using that before also, like before the revamp?
Yeah, so
Okay.
we use MailChimp with the RSS feed based one that basically just scraped our
Right.
homepage and had, the top 5 or 6 headlines every day, and it went out in the morning and at night. Now we just do a morning newsletter once a day, 5 days a week.
Gotcha. So you told me that when you were redesigning the newsletter, you subscribed to a bunch of newsletters from other public media outlets and from news organizations for some inspiration. What stood out to you when you did that, and how did that influence the strategy that you adopted?
Yeah, definitely. I'm just gonna pull up
Yeah,
my
please.
newsletter here. More interesting than my face. Yeah, so I mean, I subscribe to a bunch of the daily newsletters of the people that are on this call here. You know, Iowa Public Radio, KCUR, WBEZ, NPR, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, all of these things. And I knew going into it, so like you can see here, I have my little intro. I knew going into it that we were going to have a top story that was going to highlight kind of like the biggest news of the day, something with a good photo. We have an incredible photojournalist at WPR, and so I knew this would be a nice place to highlight some of her work. And this is just like easy right away. You get what's going on that day. And I also knew we were going to have this like in the news section that would have these other kind of bullet point news features that people need to know to keep abreast of what's going on in Wisconsin. Because we are a radio station, wanted to point people to some of our best audio. So we have this short must listen section. But then below what I'm going to call the fold in this newsletter was where I really had fun reading other daily newsletters to figure out how people were showcasing information in a way that was a little bit more creative. So some things that I really liked were, I'm going to come back to only in Wisconsin, were like a pull quote or a way to showcase a statistic. So I built this quote unquote section, this by the numbers section. And those are just ways to show like regular news stories that we have just in a different way. And it's been fun to kind of write around that. Um, and then one of the things we promise in our newsletter for subscribers is that, like, if you read this newsletter, you're going to get the news you need to know, be informed about Wisconsin, but also about the like joys and quirky things that make Wisconsin, Wisconsin. And so, this only in Wisconsin section, I try to focus it on something that's like a little bit more lighthearted and really kind of gets at the culture and sense of living here. And it's another opportunity where I'll like pull in some media. Um, Jumping back to our amazing photographer, twice a week we highlight a snapshot from her. And so these are kind of a fun way for her to be out in the community and showing some of her future photography. But yeah, I mean, I think we also highlight a podcast that is kind of new to us every Friday. But I just really loved like looking primarily at the really creative ways that different stations are highlighting different news.
Yeah, it looks really great. Also, among the goals you set for the revamped newsletter was to grow your audience from 9,000 to 15,000 subscribers, and you've almost made it there, which is amazing. What tactics have been most successful in achieving that growth?
Yeah, so we're only like 71 people away from 15,000. So if y'all want to subscribe, that would be really great. No, but you know, we one of the things that we found by far and away the most successful was like direct email asks. So when we relaunched the newsletter in June, we sent an email to everyone who'd been getting the daily RSS feed and said like something new is coming. And we definitely saw a drop off, which isn't unheard of. You know, it was different than what people had gotten. And so, as we were trying to build back, we sent emails out to every WPR member. So, like our station's full email list, it's about, 100,000 people, and asked, like, this is what you could get. Here's a fun perk. And anytime we sent out a direct email, we would see a bump of like 1,000 subscribers or more. So that was for sure the easiest. I think anytime that there's a lower barrier to entry, so all they had to do was like click a link and they could be subscribed. If you have like a lot of steps, I think you see more people drop off. So if you say like go to wpr.org/newsletters, they have to go to that URL, then they have to put their name in, then they have to press subscribe. You kind of see a drop off. The other thing that we found really useful was having a pop-up on our homepage. So this doesn't happen all the time, but when we're not in a member drive or something like that, we'll have on the homepage, if you go to wpr.org, a pop-up will come up that has a space to put in your email address right there that says like, you know, the news you need, subscribe to our daily newsletter kind of a thing. And that was also very helpful.
And Wisconsin Public Radio has also raised about $14,000, you told me, from the newsletter since relaunching it, since the relaunch through the end of 2025. And what was effective in soliciting gifts through the newsletter? How well did that work?
Yeah, totally. And that number was actually like from when we relaunched in June to December. So I don't even have
Right.
like updated data, but it kind of went above and beyond what we were expecting. And so I'm gonna go back to what I was sharing. This newsletter is just from this morning. And we are doing kind of a digital only Earth Day drive right now. That was a 3-day drive. And so I'll kind of just walk through the various places that we kind of do a call out for giving. Um, and just to be clear, all of our newsletters are free. All of our content is free. We don't do any like paid subscriptions at this point. Um, and so when we're in drives, I have this banner ad at the very top. And so there's a space where, like, right when you open the email, our graphics department will design these for me. And it's kind of like right in your face. And as you scroll down, every single newsletter far kind of halfway through has you'll see it's the same ad, has another space for like a call to action ad, and then at the very bottom, which is kind of buried, we have a tile ad and this donate button. So the tile ad, the donate button, and the call to action in the middle are in every single issue. And they do fine. You know, we'll get a click here and there, a donation here and there. But what we've noticed is that if you'll see right here in my intro for today is like it's this call from me saying there's time to join this. If you join, you're helping us get here. For this particular ask, we did the first 40 newsletter subscribers got a special like sticker pack. And so that was kind of a fun incentive that was newsletter based only. And it's the first time we've done that. So we're not quite sure how successful it was yet, but just like a little bit of a more of an incentive specifically in the newsletter. But so of those donations that we got that were the 14,000, you know, half of them came from people giving directly at this link that is in the intro. So when I am personally saying, hey, support this work, or please become part of our community and support the work that is so important to us and important to you. And what we do to make sure that we're able to track that is all of these calls to action or donation buttons have a unique Google tracking link so that we can say the intro was by far the one that led to the most gifts versus the donate button versus the tile ad.
All right. Well, congratulations on that success, and thank you for your tips there. Last but not least, we're going to hear from Autumn Widows. She's the marketing manager for Vegas PBS. And Autumn told me about how she had become an avid reader of newsletters on Substack, which really is more than just a newsletter delivery platform like MailChimp, but it has elements of social media and it facilitates discovering other newsletters that you may not know about. Autumn, you started a personal Substack, and then you decided to use Substack to promote Vegas All In, which was a digital first video series from Vegas PBS. Um, let's start by, can you show me Substack, kind of like
Sure.
what you would see as from the back end?
Can, yes. All right. So you should be able to see this. This is, let me go to the dashboard. So this is the way the page looks. If you're like you can have it on your app. So it's also on a website. It's like a very interesting platform. You can have it on app, you can have it on your phone, you can just deal with it in your emails. Some people are not even on the platform, but they receive newsletters. So they're not actively on there, but they're receiving newsletters. So you can use it to actually get people who are not on Substack to subscribe. So they don't have to be at all. So that's sometimes people ask that, do I have to be subscribed? Just like the way Facebook or Instagram, it's not a closed system like the other social media
Right.
platforms are. And this is the way it looks like if you're looking at it from your website and this is not the behind the scenes. This is the way somebody would see it and they could interact with it. And then it'll show up also if you're they have this thing called Notes, which is their social side, and you can promote your newsletter on there. But really what works over there in driving people to your newsletter is not the promotion of the newsletter itself. It's weird. The algorithm over there doesn't favor the promotion of the newsletter. It favors more like snippets from the newsletter that are more like talking points, getting people to talk around. And then they might go, let me see, and click on. So it works that way. And people who are on Substack kind of bemoan this because most of us are making most people over there are creating newsletters, right? And they wonder why the algorithm favors this. I don't have the answer to that. Sorry. And then behind the scenes, this is the way ours looks. We don't have hundreds of subscribers, mainly because this was an experiment around a particular content vehicle, and I do have some things I know you're going to ask me about, like what we could do differently. But this is the way it looks like behind. So when you put out a post, you can actually look at the post itself and see how many people you had 28% recipients, how many people, who actually looked at this, how many times they looked at it. And this is really helpful too, because you understand who is engaging the most with that particular post or that particular newsletter. And then this is the amount of time that people watch the video. So not all the posts are videos, but these particular ones that we put out in 2025, the second year of the show, we used Substack changed and continues to add things. So they added this ability to do posts that were not specifically essay driven, word driven, but also video driven, so video content. But when we first launched it in 2024, it was primarily not, they didn't have the ability to embed and actually create the post around the video. They also have other things like live. So you can actually do live interviews on that, and it drives a lot of engagement. That seems to be right now the thing that's most rewarded on Notes and on that platform.
So why do you think stations should consider Substack as a platform for doing this rather than just MailChimp or the typical email newsletter that goes into your inbox?
So it's really interesting. I think what I don't know if they should get away from actually having a MailChimp newsletter. I think that's really important, but this is a different thing. It's actually something that can be done separately. It is more like a combination between social and a newsletter. And so it is driven in some ways by the algorithm if you want to compete on Substack. So they have leaderboards over there. And the leaderboards, the more engagement you get, the more you're rewarded. So there is the kind of gamification on Substack. It wasn't like this when I first started. It was in some ways, because it's a brand new platform, they're going along, those who run Substack are going along and tweaking it as people are joining. It is one of the reasons why I've been pushing it is because there wasn't a lot of competition on there, but there was a lot of engagement. So that's really important, because by the time you get into a platform that's already pretty much saturated, it's really hard to get an audience, like an audience that really cares about it really is hard, because their eyeballs they're looking everywhere, and it's the engagement game, right? Like it's like the attention economy really just kicks in. And I think for PBS and NPR stations, we're not just putting work out that's just like clickbait, right? We actually putting substantial work out into the world that requires people to actually think deeper about subject matter. And so to try to play the attention economy actually goes against what we do, right? But that's why I like Substack, because I noticed when I was doing my own work, like research on there, I'd been on there since 2022 writing, but had actually been reading things on there prior to that, like 2020, that it seemed much more in depth, much more about educational topics, much more about intellectual conversations than any other platform that I had been on recently. Like it just was not the attention economy. It was the opposite. It was that people were really hungry for conversations around ideas. And I thought, well, this is what PBS and NPR do. We do this. We actually do engage deeply in subject matter, and we do want communities to feel connected. So I felt like this might be the platform that aligns most best with our missions. So that's why
Yeah.
I thought that it would be a good one. So, but there are challenges because now it's become quite it's there's a lot of people who have jumped on. They were originally Substack, people were kind of put off by it. They didn't want to build another thing on another platform. They also didn't like certain things that Substack had taken pretty much a hard line on, not censoring people on there. And there was a lot of hesitancy to jump, like to be on a platform that basically had a laissez-faire approach to that. And I can understand that. But now there are a lot more people and a lot more organizations on there. So it is in some ways much more difficult, but at the same time, I still feel that people are very hungry over there for connection, for learning things, and for discovering and actually like connecting, as Chanel had said, connecting to people, not just to organizations. So one of the things I think we could do better for the Vegas All-in-One is to actually think twice about doing it around content, but around subject matter and around the people and voices, like cultivating writers, cultivating the not just the clips from a show that content we've created, but who's behind it, who is actually like what they've done, why they're thinking about. So like behind the scenes things, or talking more in depth about what went into the creation of this, or even deciding to niche around something happening in your town or something happening in your city that is very interesting, in which your organization can really really stick with and build out and make it its own thing. I don't one thing that I've discussed over here is whether or not we should put it around our brand, the Vegas PBS, and I don't know if that would work. And I think you're probably going to ask me the third question, so we we can talk about
Well, actually, I think
why I wouldn't suggest that.
right. Well, I actually think we should go to
Oh, you
some
want
questions from the
Okay.
audience now because there are so many, and I've just like it seems like people want to know so much. I wish we almost had double the time to talk with everyone. But let's take some time now, Amber, if you want to jump in and throw out some questions. It looks like people have a lot that they would like to know about.
Yeah, yeah. Great questions in the chat. A lot of engagement. Thank you everyone for sharing. There was a lot of questions initially around, will these examples be available after the webinar? If you all have links to share or things like that, would you be, up for sharing those? We can even put in I know there's examples in the chat too, so we could share that out as a document afterwards for everyone with the recording. So everyone is excited to see it and experience it themselves. Just to answer that, there are some questions around, Autumn, you talked about Substack, but what about the other platforms? Are there pros and cons that you all have found with the various platforms you're using? And how much time are you spending? A lot of questions about the amount of time it takes to put together these newsletters. Maybe Madeline, do you want to start?
Yeah, I can tag in. It really depends on the day. I was wondering about Jenny's as well, like with the different sections that she has, if she's including each one of those every day or if it kind of changes depending. I'm guessing it's the latter. Um, but it can take anywhere from 1 hour if I'm being really focused to several, depending on kind of the news that's coming in. And I did shoot myself in the foot a little bit in terms of the good news section, because I am determined to include that every day. But goodness gracious, if there are not days where I can't find anything. So that sometimes it's just kind of sourcing the outside material that takes us the longest, but we've really streamlined that process, especially turning in all of our reporters on air spots into a live blog. That helps streamline our process for the daily quite a bit.
Just to jump in, and I saw this question in the chat too. Yeah, so basically every newsletter has the intro, top story, the news blurbs, and the must listen section. And then everything below. Um, the podcast is our politics podcast goes in once a week. The photo goes in twice a week. And as for the like quote or by the numbers and the only in Wisconsin section, I always try to have at least one of those in every issue. sometimes two, rarely all three, just with based on the amount of content we have. And sometimes you really feel like you're trying to squeeze something to fit into that model or into that content type, which isn't always doesn't always do it a service. So I would say that the time input is similar to what Madeline suggested. It's like about an hour if I'm really cruising, can be more depending on what's in each issue. Also, it's just a lot of times the work happens toward the end of the day because that's when our stories are coming in. So it's a mad dash at like 4 p.m. And sometimes I'm up at 6 making sure that little things have to be changed if stuff happens overnight.
I'll say for ours, I mean, ours are a really different kind of format and they're pop-up. So for the election newsletters, we start writing as soon as the ballot count drops at like 5 p.m. And then we're kind of writing and like figuring out the format as we go. So I would say typically that's about maybe like 2.5 hours of work. And we've traditionally had two writers and one editor kind of all doing it, and we'll like break up sections and we'll assign sections out. And so maybe in about 2.5 hours, we'll kind of be done for the day. And then in the morning, because stuff could change overnight, we'll check in again and like put any last minute changes before we send it out. So that's not a typical make it make sense send. For building your block, we really it took me a couple of months to put it together because it was so much to synthesize. It was quite a lot of work, but I only had to do it once. After I did that one time, I kind of let it go, and then the newsletter people could subscribe and get it whenever they wanted. I've updated it once, and that one update didn't really take very long. I had to update a couple of numbers, and I had to like maybe one of the issues there was a major legislative change, but it's not the main dynamics in housing don't change very much year to year. So the main themes were pretty much the same.
I think with building your block in particular, the other thing that allowed for when we did sort of that refresh, added the updates in there, what probably took more time was thinking about how do we sort of re-promote this thing that's been around for a while to people. So we came up with ways to amplify it again. And that was where the bulk of our time went with getting back into that newsletter course because a lot of it, the content itself didn't have to change.
And are there specific pros and cons to the platforms? I think a lot of people are curious to, what platform they're on and what you're on and what the benefits are if people are thinking about shifting. Are there specific benefits or strengths and weaknesses of the platforms you're using that you think would be good for others to learn from you?
MailChimp's super easy. It's very drag and drop. It's intuitive and user friendly. I have gripes that I could go on for hours about the analytics that they keep on changing, where they are and what they mean and how they pull them. But like overall, so I do a lot of our annual analytics manually, but overall, it's a really easy platform to use and get started on.
One thing we like about MailChimp, and granted that's all I've used, so we didn't transfer, but they have some really great web tie-ins. So the pop-ups that I was talking about, we use MailChimp's pop-up builder, and that allows people to enter their email address right on the pop-up, and that's been really helpful. Their gravity forms are really nice. And it works well with WordPress, which is the CMS that WPR.org uses. So that's why we've kind of stuck with MailChimp so far.
Great. Another question, well, a series of questions around metrics. Some people are asking if you could share your general average open rates, click-through rates. What are your goals when you're going into, newsletters? What kind of metrics are you looking for, and how is that going for all of you? Anyone want to jump in? Otherwise, I can go in reverse order. Autumn, do you want to talk about that?
Oh, so that was so we've put this on pause. So I don't know if I can really answer this. So yeah. So we're not really focused on that right now. We're trying to go back to the drawing board about how to relaunch our presence on Substack and in a way that is not around one particular content piece. So that like this was around a show, and it's around a show that only for now has only 2 years worth of episodes, right? 5 each per year. So that's not a lot of content to drive on for a weekly newsletter. So that was one thing I was going to say, is thinking about that, thinking about what your topic is going to be and how you can sustain. You don't have to write weekly on Substack either to actually have a lot of engagement. You can do it maybe twice a month. So there, yeah.
Any others? How are you thinking about metrics?
And like Madeline said, like MailChimp keeps keeps changing what their stuff is. So when we first launched, our open rate was like solidly around 50%, but that didn't necessarily take into all of the like bot filtering that MailChimp now does. So it looks like our open rate is much worse at like 26%. But one thing that has maintained really good is our clicks per unique open, which I look at more than just straight up click rate. Um, and one of our goals when we relaunched was to maintain that click to open rate because now our newsletter gives users more information. Before it was just a headline and a photo. And so you really had to click on it to get any news out of it. But now if you read the blurbs, you don't necessarily need to click on a link. And we have been able to maintain it and it's almost increased a little. So before it was like 16% and now it's like 23%. And so that click to unique open has been really encouraging. I don't know why people are still clicking, but they are. So that's exciting. Um, but I think what we did is when we decided we were going to relaunch, we picked three goals. And we were part of the Pointer Challenge grant, we had a Pointer Challenge grant, which was a really great opportunity. And they kind of helped us do these goal settings. So our goals were to increase subscribers to 15,000, to maintain our click to open rate. And then we had a revenue goal, which I don't remember what it was because I think it was like absurdly optimistic. But kind of setting little goals like that, I think can be really helpful where, at 6 months at a time, you're kind of looking like, well, we want to do this. And then you can focus your efforts on, okay, well, if we want to build subscribers, what can we do to do that? If we want to increase our open rate, what can we do to do that? Play with subject line. Should we play with like the grabby sentence that's at the very top or the preview text and things like that?
Got it. And Laura had a clarifying question in the chat. So by adding blurbs, clicks increased. Did I hear that correctly? She was asking.
I guess. I mean, it's hard to say. I haven't like polled the audience or anything like that, but I think I expected to see the click to open rate decline just because people were getting more information just by reading the newsletter on its own, and that didn't happen. So maybe it's the personalization of it. Maybe it's that we have a more engaged user and people that kind of skimmed and deleted have unsubscribed and so I wish I could have a better answer as to what's driving that.
Mhm. All right, there's some questions around looking at the audiences. How are you cleaning up segmenting your audiences? Are you only sending newsletters out to people who've opened or signed up for your emails within the last 6 months, the last 12 months? Are you regularly looking at that list?
Brianna mentioned this for Elias, but we did a big purge towards the end of last year. So we had done some amount of list cleaning over time, but it had been really long since we had really like who's inactive based on what time period. We looked at a couple different intervals. We looked at 3 months, 6 months, a year. And then what we ended up landing on was people who had not opened or clicked on newsletters for 6 months or more. We would purge all of them to basically get back to here are the active people and really operate based on what they were clicking on, what they seemed to want. And that really helped. And that's the cadence that we're going to do from now on is every 6 months, get rid of the people who have gone completely inactive. We also did like a warning campaign too, just in case, because some people, they kind of ebb and flow with how often they're clicking on a newsletter. So for a couple of months, we sent out warnings like, hey, you haven't clicked in a while. If you haven't opened to this one and you want to stay, please click, and then you'll stay on this list. If not, we'll quit bothering you. And that way, we're always just talking to the people who really want to be there and are engaging with our newsletters and then making decisions based on their behavior and not constantly trying to re-engage people who might just be completely tuned out, not even looking at their inboxes anymore, whatever the case may be.
That's super smart. Well, we are about at the top of the hour. I'm just gonna, if everyone's okay to stay on for another like 5 minutes here just to get through a few more questions because we have so many good ones. We'll just go a little over here to try to get some of these addressed. There's questions around your own inspiration. Are there places, I know a lot of you shared when you were starting and researching. Are there other inspirations that you suggest to our audience today that you think they should check out, besides, of course, having everyone subscribe to all of yours?
I can say for Elias, it comes from a couple different places. So we look at newsletters and stuff that we really like, what's engaging us about them, and just sort of send that back and forth to each other, see what we can learn. But then also like a huge part of it in terms of when we decide to test a new newsletter product just comes from the audience. What are they asking us for a lot, especially if they're already subscribed to a list? For example, one thing that we're still working on is the best way to serve Orange County, because we get a lot of people who are like, hey, I love Elias coverage. If possible, I would really love to see more coverage for Orange County more regularly. And so that's what we're sort of thinking about right now is what is the right product to spin up for those people? How can we engage that audience? Do we have enough content to serve them consistently the way that they want to? And if not, what do we have to change that's happening in the newsroom to make that possible?
I sign up for like so many newsletters, it's disgusting, but I try and make sure it's not just public media because there's obviously a lot bigger outfits that have a lot more resources than us that we can still emulate, even with, limited staff and time. So I try and make sure to sign up for bigger outlets and keep it outside the public media sphere sometimes too.
Mhm. Right. There is a question about AI. To what degree, if any, are any of the panelists using AI to scrape newsletter content or using it in your workflows? I see a 0. I see some head shakes.
Yeah, we're not using it at all yet. We've started to explore what could be possible there, but we're not using anything regularly. We haven't committed to AI for newsletters.
Okay. Good to know. Do you have any tips or advice for getting newsroom staff on board, particularly with shorter pieces of writing for newsletters or breaking up big blocks of text? Some of the notes around how to format newsletters. How do you kind of bring those two worlds together?
I think at this point, like I am primarily writing everything in our newsletter, but that comes from, or I'm like synthesizing, paraphrasing all the things that are in our newsletter coming from the work that our reporters are doing. And if it's a really complicated topic, or sometimes that top blurb, if it's a feature that doesn't have an easy lead to jump in there, maybe it's more feature based, I'll just work with the reporter in Slack and we'll go kind of back and forth and say, this is what I wrote up. Is this getting at what your story is about, or would you rather have it say something different? Sometimes I will go to their radio scripts and pull that because it's quick and snappy, and that's another really easy way to get at like the nut of a story. But yeah, at this point, like the reporters aren't the ones that are writing stuff for the newsletter.
Yeah, there's a lot of comments around being a small team or a team of one. So do any of you have advice for these public media stations out there who have smaller teams tackling this work?
I've kind of speaking kind of to the last question and this one, like working with reporters too, it's sort of seeing what is in their story that is unique about that they can bring something unique to the newsletter. So sometimes what we've done is you've written a story, tell me about how you got that story. And then, it sounds interesting. And I'll be like, hey, do you want to just write me like 200 words that you can do sort of a takeover in our newsletter where it's like from your voice talking about your feature? That's really helpful. So when we either don't have the bandwidth to write the entire newsletter or just want to give people a little bit of variety just to make it a little interesting, try out a different voice and see how that performs. And then also I would say something that we have learned and part of why we were willing to try something like Make It Make Sense or Building Your Blog is to not always think about, oh, we have to build a product that is going to serve everybody daily. What is it that the audience actually needs? And I think making a consistent promise is more than trying to fulfill just like, oh, it has to be something that you send out every day. I think that consistency and what you can do is most important so people know what to expect from you.
Agree.
Yeah, and just starting out with proving out small experiments, I think, has been really helpful because in the beginning, it was not reporters who were writing Make It Make Sense. It was like me, and I had another colleague, some former colleagues who were doing that as like a small team outside of the reporting, or the reporters group. And then I think once it turned out to be pretty successful and like people really responded to it, then it was easier to get reporters on board the next time around, especially if we had like staff turnover and we really needed somebody to help write the newsletter. But showing the numbers, like, hey, we got 4,000 subscribers just by doing something for 3 weeks. Like, let's try it again, and like and then once they had the experience of actually writing it and they knew it was only going to be time bound, they found out it was really fun. And I think like because you can inject so much more of your personality than you can in like a straight news story, for example.
I would say, like, for the smaller stations that might not have as consistent of content, trying to figure out, obviously, like, to what sort of cadence you can promise, but also decide on like one or two components that you can promise every single time you send it, and then like three to five that are gravy on top. The way that Jenny's adding in photos or a quote or something like that. A lot of our newsletters utilize that. We use Airtable to organize what content we're going to put in. I love Airtable. But that kind of helps us have, a template of we have all these different options and you can look at what you can fill in this day versus this day. And that really helps us kind of keep everything organized. But have your core content and then add sprinkles on top when you can.
And then definitely making sure that other people know how to build your product. So, I'm the only newsletter editor at WPR. It's my primary focus, but I need to not work sometimes. And so our digital team, we've got like a bench of four people who can all write the newsletter, and then it comes from them on those days. And I think that's also kind of fun and exciting for our subscribers to get to know Liz or get to know Alyssa or Nate. So make sure you have backfill.
Good note. All right. Autumn, anything you want to add on that note of working with a small team?
Oh, um, so like most people who are on small teams, I'm sure all of you you have more than one role and you're not just like editing one newsletter or editing only newsletters. And I actually don't do the newsletters over here. I do social media and I was the lead of events as well. And so this was a project that I thought would be interesting in a test. So I understand that, and I understand being pulled in so many directions and what can happen. And I think I agree with Chanel again about being in some ways gentle on yourself in terms of like the expectations. Like if you are a one person team, you're not going to be able, and you have like other things you're doing, like running events and also all the social media, you're not going to be able to produce quality work daily. It's just not fair to put that on you or because burnout is real. and and I think maybe once a month is good. If you can put out quality work once a month on something, and yes, I know people are like attention economy, attention, but if you're doing really quality work, people who will find it if you spend more time on promoting it rather than churning out and churning out and churning out. And I know with AI, it's going to be more and more like we're racing against AI as human beings, and it's not going to be easy to do just the churn. So quality work will actually rise. I do believe that it will rise in a sea of like AI slop. So just thinking about that and not thinking about not trying to put too much on your plate.
It's a great note. Great note to end on. Quality will rise. Well, big thank you to all the panelists. This has been fantastic conversation. There's a lot of great comments in the chat. We will share a recording, transcript, as well as the chat log as well. And then we'll get together a list of all the examples that have been shared so people can check those out. But a big thank you, and I'll turn it over to Mike if you want to wrap us up.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. This has really been great. Good to see so much interest, and I wish we could go even have more time or even do another one. But thanks for joining us. And I just wanted to say you can sign up for Current's newsletter at current.org and get the latest in public media news. And also, we announce these webinars that we host on a quarterly basis, and collaboration with public media innovators in the newsletter. So if you're on our list, you will be sure to be aware of those. So thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks.